Okay, are we here?
Yes.
Yes, Professor.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so cost volume profit analysis. So you're going through these things. We learned what these basic things are. Contribution margin, we know what it is. Contribution margin ratio, you read this. Break-even point is important. It's the difference between, well, break-even point is, first of all, what is it? It's where our profit is zero, right? Our profit is zero at break-even point. Break-even point refers to the level of sales. So when we say our break-even point is $500,000, that means our sales are $500,000 at zero profit, at break-even. Okay. Margin of safety. What is margin of safety? It's the difference between what our actual sales are and break-even sales. So, which actually might be below break-even sales. So we are not making break-even. We don't have any margin of safety. We are negative, right? But margin of safety is we have $500,000 in sales, but our break-even sales are $300,000. Meaning at 300,000, our profit is zero, right? So anything above this, we are making money. We are in a positive area. So 500 minus 300 would be 200,000, right? So that would be a margin of safety. So this is how much sales we can lose before we start losing money, right? So if our sales are 500,000 and break even is 300,000, we can lose 200,000 sales before we hit zero break even, meaning zero profit, right? After that, we'll start losing money. Of course, we don't want to lose those 200,000 because that's that's not fully our profit. Those are just sales above break even. But that's the margin of safety. That's the cushion, right? That's the cushion. So we need to know this. Okay, so you don't need to get concerned about, a lot of these different kind of what looks like equations, or you have to know them, but they are all sort of derived from same thing, which is you start from the equation basically on top, which is what is your profit, net operating income? Well, it's sales minus all your costs, and your costs consist of variable and fixed, right? So now, as somebody asked already, well, what is contribution margin? Contribution margin is in between variable and net operating income. So there's fixed cost in between. So when you get to this is why it's good to cover this chart as soon as possible, so you can, move these things around and be comfortable with it instead of leaving it for next Thursday, or there's no review or anything next Thursday, but or leaving it for last second before the homework and quizzes are due, and then taking the exam on Sunday, being kind of almost clueless, other than reading the thing and listening to lectures, but not practicing anything. So because you have to be able to move things around, because you always have, again, enough information. But you don't get concerned with all these kind of looking like equations, or just understand them again. So you start with the first one. What is profit? Profit is sales minus costs, total cost, which we know already. But that total cost can be separated into variable and fixed, right? What is break even? Well, we know what break even is now. How do we find it? Well, it's here. How do we find it? It's narrated lectures again, so we're not going to go over this in detail. Target profit sales is related also to break-even point. You just add your target profit to the fixed cost to find your target profit sales, and then margin of safety. We just discussed what margin of safety is. Again, you need to go through narrated lectures. So here we will focus on just some examples and some points. Again, it looks like a lot of equations here, or what your textbook calls equations. Well, the basic equation here is this one, right? Or I should say even this one. Profit is equal sales minus total cost. Total cost is separated into variable and fixed, so we can manipulate it easier. And what is variable cost? Well, variable cost total, we're talking about total cost, is simply variable cost per unit times quantity, number of units, right? Fixed cost is just fixed cost. What are the sales? Well, sales are just price times same quantity. See, same quantity. So when you reduce this down, then you have the same quantity here. Same quantity. But what is the difference? The difference between price and variable cost per unit. And that's the contribution margin, as I think Brian said. So either per unit or in total, you have contribution margin. Well, if it's per unit, then times quantity. If you multiply these two, then you have contribution margin in total. Minus fixed cost gives you your profit, right? So you have to be comfortable with this. So that's one way to solve problems, to work on problems, not just solve problems, to understand what's going on. So that's the equations. Then we have shortcuts, right? Shortcuts, which are the same thing that derived from this thing, So it's nothing new here, right? It just saves you time. That's all. For those of you who have good memory and like to memorize things, and it saves you time. So break-even sales, instead of deriving it through this here, we just say fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit. Boom. That's how many units you need to get to your break-even sales. Now, if you want break-even sales in dollars, you would, instead of CM per unit, you would do CM ratio here, right? So again, this is why you have to jump into this chapter immediately today or tomorrow or whenever, but as soon as possible, because this sounds, and it is simple, but then you start looking at problems. So now what do I do, right? So practicing these problems, going over this definitely before the exam a couple of times will help you. And then finally, so these are three ways, you see, I call them here methods, three methods to work on problems. So this is one method. This is kind of basically where everything is coming from. This basic equation. Well, profit is equal revenue minus sales. That's common sense, right? But of course, we know a little bit more than just common sense. So we break it down into different pieces. This is the same thing as above, except shortcuts. Again, you just memorize it. Memorize fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit. Now on the exam, you will have open book and so you don't actually need even to memorize, right? But if the problem is a little bit more complicated, I mean, sometimes you take an hour or 2 hours to work on your homework. So you have to be also kind of fairly fast. You don't have time to check for every single thing. So these are the shortcuts. But in generally speaking, when the exam is not open book, when there's no notes, people when they take live exam in this class, there's no notes, there's no cheat sheet, there's nothing, right? So some people say, how am I going to memorize this? Well, you don't have to. You don't have to memorize. It's easy. First of all, it's not difficult, especially if you practice. But you can derive it all from here. Now, again, finally, I like this way or this method a lot because it really shows you, as who asked a second ago also, is the fixed cost, the difference between net operating income and contribution margin. Well, you don't need to ask me or You just look at this format, right? And you don't need to memorize it that way. You memorize. Fixed cost is the difference between net. No, that's not the right way to do it. You know what fixed cost is? Fixed cost is fixed cost. But how do I find fixed cost? Well, you look at this format here. You look at this format. Let me erase this. It seems like I like to draw a lot on this thing. Okay, just look at the format. This is the format that we learned in chapter 1. Yeah, I'll get to you, Guy. I think you raised your hand. This is a basic format. Revenue minus variable cost, you get contribution margin. Then comes fixed cost, then you have profit. So now, if you know that revenue is 500, and if you know that 300 are variable costs, well, what's your contribution margin? Your contribution margin is 200, right? 500 minus 300. Well, of course, you have to know this format. I mean, you just have to know it. So we cannot eliminate everything. So that's 200. Now, you don't know what your fixed costs are, but you're told that net operating income is 70. Well, which number can be here between 200 and 70? That's what I mean by that this format is great, and you don't need to memorize things like this minus this is this, or this plus this is this. You just know the format, and you're just plugging in numbers, right? So which number can be here between 200 and 70? There's only one number that can be here, which is 130. No other number can possibly be here, right? It cannot be 300, because 200 minus 300 would be minus 100. Now, if your net operating income is minus 100, then this means that fixed cost is 300, right? So it's that easy. Same thing for everything else. So this is why I recommend strongly this format, that you use this format. Of course, you need to know this too, because it depends how question is phrased and set up. But if you know nothing, but you know this format, it will help you a lot. Okay, so you say, you're just plugging in things. You know that revenue is here, you know that variable costs are here, and you know that contribution margin is here, and you understand what this contribution margin is. This is covered all in chapter 1, and we are going through it again in this chapter. And then you know that the fixed cost comes in, then it's a net operating income. So you just go up or down. You're saying, well, what's going on here? Margin of safety is total sales minus break-even sales. We said this. You need to memorize this, right? Or memorize. Again, also understand, just kind of associate. Margin of safety. What does this mean, margin of safety? It's a cushion, right? Cushion, safety, cushion. So between what? Well, between what I am selling now, actually selling, what my sales are actually now, whatever they are, 500, 300, 700. And sales where I'm making zero profit, break even, right? So anything in between, it's your margin of safety, right? I mean, again, of course, there's a lot more to this, in a sense that you have to understand, well, these sales then depending on how, you know, complex or difficult the question is. Are these sales actually my whole profit? Are they my whole profit? Well, think about it. You know, what's the portion of your sales? I mean, of your profit? Well, it's your sales minus total cost, right? Now, if you say break even, well, with break even, we already covered fixed cost, because fixed cost already covered with break even. They have to be covered. So if contribution margin is 200, and your net operating income is 0, meaning break even, then that means your fixed cost is 200, but you covered it already. you covered it with your contribution margin. You had to cover it, otherwise it would be negative here, negative 10 or 20 or 100 or whatever, right? So fixed cost is not an issue, but these sales that you have above break-even sales, they're not purely your profit. All money goes to your profit. Why? Well, we know it here. Why? Because price per unit, you don't make every dollar your price in your profit, unless your variable cost is like, marginal, like zero. So you actually get contribution margin to go into your profit, right? So kind of, and those are the things when you work more on problems and do it again a little bit earlier and in advance, then it's not an issue at all. Okay, Guy, go ahead. You raised your hand earlier.
Thank you, Professor. Can you just explain me quickly the difference between the sales at total profit in units and sales at total profit in dollars in the break-even sales?
They're the same sales, right? It's just in number of units. So you can say your sales are 500,000. 500,000. Well, we will see examples now in a second. 500,000, those are your sales. Well, those are your sales in dollars, right?
So basically, whenever in the question I'm giving that certain manufacturer wants to get a target profit of sales, I'll use the two bottom ones.
You mean these two?
Yes.
Yes. If you want some target profit, yeah, then you would use these two. Correct. If you're looking for break even, then you would use these two.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Right. But I thought that you're asking the difference between dollars and number of units. Well, it's just expressed in number of units. So if you have $500 in break even sales or target profit sales, it doesn't matter, either one. This is expressed in dollars, right? Now, if you say that each one of your units you're selling for $5, well, then how many units do you have to sell?
100.
100, that's it. So you divide this by $5 per unit, so you get 100 units. So that would be your sales in units. Sales in units or sales in dollars, right? Sales in units, 100 units. Sales in dollars, $500. How do you know? Well, 100 units, you're selling each for $5, so that's $500. So that's that. Okay, this is good so far. Anybody else?
Thank you.
So again, format, I would highly recommend contribution format for questions. Now, don't get stuck on this now and say, I'm going to just do this and nothing else. That probably will not work either, but contribution format, very helpful. And then you have to know what margin of safety is, right? Okay, so some basic examples, and you can see here in how to, for example, in different ways, how to approach the problem in different ways. This is a very basic example. So we have here what? We have our monthly salary, and we had this example when I asked you in chapter 1, right? What is the answer? So, or something similar. But if your monthly rent is $1,000 and salary each, so that's $2,000. Is this, what kind of cost is this? Well, this is fixed cost, right? This is fixed cost, and we have it here, fixed cost, $2,000. We have it here, $2,000, right? And then the cost per t-shirt is $2. And your sales 1,000 t-shirts. That's the quantity, right? And then if you are selling each t-shirt for $10, what's your profit? Well, again, so you start with the basic equation. Sales minus total cost. What is the total cost? Variable and fixed. How much is fixed? Well, fixed, you know, it's 2,000. Now, what about the rest? Well, these are the same units, 1,000 units. It's just expressed here is revenue 10 times 1,000, and here's variable cost 2 times 1,000. Well, what's the difference between these two? It's 8. 8, right? So that would be your contribution margin. See it here? Contribution margin per unit. Or you can say 10,000 minus 2,000, 8,000, which will be the same contribution margin, which is the same as this here, except in total, right? So now we have 8,000, 8 times 1,000 is 8,000, minus 2,000 in fixed cost, that's 6,000 profit. Okay, see, that's easy. So that's the very basic example. And then we have it in the contribution margin format. So you just say, okay, how much money am I making here? 10 times 1,000, 10,000. How much will be my variable cost? 2 times 1,000, 2,000. What is my contribution margin? 8,000. How much is my fixed cost? 2,000. One for rent, one for salary. What's my profit? 6,000, right? Very, very straightforward. This is per unit. This is per unit. Let me see. Okay, 2 participants raised their hand. Let me see a second. I don't see who, but and then just on the right side here, you see, what if you have 1,001 unit, single unit. So you know how much your profit will be at 1,000. Will be 6,000. If you sell one single more unit, how much will your profit be? Well, will anything change with fixed cost? Now we know already about fixed cost a lot. We're sick of it, right? Through all those overhead then. Fixed cost is not changing. Nothing is changing. 2,000, right? Now, but what's changed? Well, one single more unit. Well, that one single more unit will cost us $2, but we will sell it for 10. So we will make 8. That's exactly here per unit, right? 8. So $8 for one unit. How much will your new profit be? Well, $8 plus 6,000, $6,000 and $8. Okay, you can go if you want all like down through this and say 1,001 times 10, 1,001 times 2 will be 1,001 times 8, which is 8,008. And you see that fixed costs staying the same, so you get to 6,008. Okay, people raised their hands. Go ahead.
Professor, I have a question.
Yes.
That $8 next to profit is marginal profit for one unit.
Yes, yes, very good. That's why it's called contribution margin. Marginal, yes, marginal profit.
And
well,
what about,
you know, maybe marginal profit would not be the best way to describe it, but let's go with it. Yes.
And the $1,000 is contribution margin for selling the total in dollar.
What do you mean $1,000? Which
the next after eight just multiple 1,000. I want to know what was that. You said something about this.
This one here?
Yes, yes.
Well, that's the number of units. You don't see a dollar sign over there. That's the number of units.
Okay. So if $8 is for one unit, where we can find the total profit in dollar? It is the $6,000?
Well, what about this here? What's the profit? That does it says
is net operating income, so.
Yes, that's the profit. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Who else raised their hand?
I have a question. So, Professor, so if the quantity changed to the 1 unit, you added $8 for like to the net operating income. So the
Right.
next one is like if revenue goes to 1,002, and then you just add $8 more to the net operating income, right?
Excellent. Very good. What's your name?
My
Well, whatever number you have now, you can say, okay, 1,035 units. What would be a new profit?
so
Well, you know what
yeah.
profit is at 1,000. It's 6,000. And again, fixed cost is staying the same. So each unit is just adding $8 to your profit. So 35 times 8, that's it.
280.
Yeah, whatever it is, 280,
80.
correct. 3 times 8, 240, 280. Very good. So
net
yes,
operating income will be 6,280 for
correct. Very good, very good, very good, very good. So the point is that nothing is changing with fixed costs here, right? And again, this is all chapter 1. The price is staying the same, 10, and the variable cost is staying the same at 2. So this will work for every unit then. 10 minus 2 is 8. So you will be making contribution margin on $8 of $8 for each unit. Again, look, this looks very simple here, but if you're under pressure and you the question is a little bit more complicated, then you start, because if you're not ready, right? If you're ready, if you again go now and start studying immediately today and start going through these problems and start connecting things, because these are very good questions. This is a very good question. What about if I add another unit? Okay, well, whatever unit you add, because this is constant here, whatever unit you add, each unit will just get $8 in contribution margin. Do not get confused or fooled and think, well, if I sell one more unit, which means I'm making $10 because I'm going to sell it for $10, I'm going to make $10 in profit. No, there is something in between here, variable cost of $2. So you will not make $10 in profit. You will make $8 in profit, additional $8 in profit, right? How many units do you need to sell to break even? Well, okay, so I guess that's on the next slide. So we will go to the next slide. But this is a very basic example. Again, basic example of the formats that you can use. We will not go through every single one of these things. Okay, this is CM ratio. You will look at this. So break-even sales. You see break-even sales. So what are the break-even again? What's the break-even again? It's when your profit is 0. So if you're working with this format here, you set up your profit here to be 0. Set it up to be 0. Okay, and then you work your way through it, and then you end up with that shortcut that I call shortcut. You end up with a shortcut of fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit. Okay, fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit. This will give you sales in units. If you want to do sales in dollars directly, then you would divide total fixed cost by contribution margin ratio. But I mean, if you know what your units are, number of units are, which in this case is 250, then you just multiply it by your price per unit. Because again, you're looking for sales. So that's times 10. So that's 2,500. Right. Now, if you're using CM format here, you just plug in here 0. Plug in here 0. And again, as Guy said earlier, I think, well, what's the fixed cost? Is the difference between net operating contribution margin. Again, you don't need to memorize this way. You know the format and you say, okay, I don't know what my sales are. Okay, you don't know what your sales are. That's the question, for example. You don't know what your sales are, but you know what your fixed cost is. Well, if you know what your fixed cost is, it's 2,000, and you have 0 here because that's your profit at break even. Then what is your contribution margin? Contribution margin is 2,000. That's it, 2,000. And then you're told, for example, you have to be given more information. So then you're told, for example, what your contribution margin ratio is, or what your proportion of variable cost is with revenue or something. And this helps you figure out then, let's say, either variable cost or if it's given, let's say variable cost is given, it's 500. Well, if variable cost is 500, then you know 2,000 plus 500 here, so your revenue is 2,500, right? Or if you're told that contribution margin is whatever percentage, 60% or 80% or something like that of your sales. Well, if it's 80% of your sales, then your sales are 2,500, right? So you have to be given enough information. You're always given enough information. Or you're told that your price is 10 and your variable costs are 2. Well, so you know that contribution margin is 8 per unit. Well, 2,000 divided by 8 then should give you 250 units. Because these 250 units are same for revenue, same for variable cost, same for contribution margin. We discussed this in chapter 1, right? Contribution margin. So again, the format, very helpful. Again, if you sell one more unit, 251 units, what will your profit be? New profit, it will be $8. Here it was 0. Here you will just add $8 to your profit, net operating income. Okay, so that's break even. So that's break even. Everybody good?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, this is with the ratio, so you will look at this. Target profit. Well, target profit just means it's basically the same thing as break even, except instead of 0 here, so 0 for profit in break even, you would just put the number that you want or that the question is asking for. If your target profit is 20,000, well, then the number here will be 20,000, but everything else will stay the same. Everything else will stay the same. You will just have to add these 20,000 on top of your break-even sales. Not sales, but right. I mean, break-even sales, but not just 20,000 plus break-even sales. But you will have to 20,000 in terms of calculation on top of your fixed cost, basically. But 20,000 that will include, of course, that's the profit. That will also include your variable cost. So that will be additional actually sales, which would be, in this case be what, 7,500 and what were the sales before for this problem? the sales were, okay, the revenue was 10,000. Sales with 10,000. Break-even revenue was 2,500. But to make 20,000 in profit, we will need 27,500. So we will need additional 17,000. Well, here was 6. So to go up from, okay, to go up from 6 to 20, that was 14,000 profit, but we are looking for 20,000 profit. So from break even of 0, which was 2,500 in sales, we will need to go to 27,500 in sales. So that will be 22,000. No, what am I saying? $25,000. $25,000. Right. So we will need to make new $25,000 in sales to make $20,000 in profit. So you cannot just add 20,000 to whatever the previous sales were, 2,500, because that will give you 22,500, but you would be short $5,000. Why? Well, because you have variable cost, right? You have variable cost. So you need actually $25,000 in sales. But in terms of calculation, that's basically what it is. You are adding these 20 just to fixed cost. When you look at it here, you see that you just add 20,000 to 2,000 fixed cost, and you divide this by your contribution margin per unit. So that's the same equation or calculation as earlier, same thing. Now, if you're using, or in terms of shortcut, you see it here, target profit plus total fixed cost, divide contribution margin per unit. If you're using this format here, then it's even easier, right? You say, well, $10 times, well, question mark, and then say $20,000 in profit, fixed cost of 2,000, so that we have contribution margin of 22,000. And again, then you would have to be given additional information, some ratios or contribution margin per unit, which here you know, for example, 10 minus 2 is 8. So you divide 22 by 8, you will get 2,750 units. Times 10, again, means 27,500. And then the question is, well, what's the variable cost, or what's well, it's $2 times 2750, which is 5,500. Don't worry if right now you feel like, well, I'm going too fast, or jump, or you need to go to narrated lectures anyway. But you need to then sit down and look at this on your own and practice, right? Practice. Once you understand, so you go to narrated lectures and narrated exercises, where I go much slower, and then you go and you try to do it yourself. But why I'm going, for example, here back and forth between these slides, so you can see relationships, right? You can see relationships here. You can see the relation between target profit and break even. And you see what is not. What is not is you don't just add 20,000, for example, to these sales, 2,500, because then you're forgetting variable cost in between. Again, the same thing as I explained earlier. Your new sales, these $10 here, are not immediately your profit, right? So you don't forget this. Any questions while I'm erasing this? Okay, everybody's good. Now we can have some changes, of course. That's the whole point. These are all basic examples. Basic meaning everything is there. So it's not like this one is more, the others are more difficult. They're difficult just because the piece of information change, but the concepts are always, everything is the same, right? So you're using these concepts, that's why basic. But now we can have changes, right? Things change. In reality, things change. So what would be the profit if we increase sales from 1,000 to 1,100? But we also increase advertising budget by 1,000. Well, then you are asking yourself, what about this 1,000 here? What does it affect? Does it affect variable cost or fixed cost or what? That's a new cost, right? Well, it's fixed, right? It's not related to your units directly. So you will add it to the fixed cost. That's it. So that's the new variable, and it's here, 3,000, new variable. So you can compare the old one to the new one, right? See, this here is staying the same. Nothing changed with price, nothing changed with variable cost per unit. So your contribution margin is always 8. However, your number of units changed from 1,000 to 1,100. But your fixed costs changed to 3,000. So you increased your sales, but your fixed cost increased for 1,000. So your net operating income is lower, $200. So for example, a question here could be, what would be the profit impact? Well, the profit impact is $200 loss. Right. So those are the changes. Basic changes. Anything can change. Price can change per unit. Variable cost can change per unit. Fixed cost can change. Okay. Changes in variable cost and sales volume. What would be the profit if we buy higher quality t-shirts, thus increasing variable cost per unit by $2? So how much is our new variable cost? Well, it's $4, right? $2 before plus $2 extra for higher quality of shirts. So that's $4. So what will happen with our contribution margin? Well, clearly it will decrease to 6, right? 10 staying the same because we are not told anything about price. Minus $4 and new variable cost per unit. This is new contribution margin 6. That's a big deal because we are losing $2 on each unit. So now we say we will sell 1,400 t-shirts. So look what happens. Previously we were selling 1,000 t-shirts. Now we're selling 1,400. That's 40% increase. 40% increase. But we will make only $400 more, even with fixed costs staying the same. Why? Because our contribution margin is so much lower, right? So that's important. So how many units would we have to sell here to break even, for example? More or less than before to break even?
I think more.
Of course, more, because very good, because your contribution margin is lower, right? So it's covering your fixed cost much slower. Think about it. Your fixed cost is still 2,000. And before you divide it into 8, so you get how many? 250 units. 250 units or $2,500, right? If you multiply it by 10. So that would be your break-even point, 250 units. But now you have same $2,000 dividing into 6, or I should say 6 dividing into 2,000. Well, you have to sell many more units. What is 2,000 divided by 6?
333.
333. Now you have to sell 333 just to break even. Just to break even. This is why you have to sell so many more units just to make $400 extra, right? Because your contribution margin is much lower. Remember how important contribution margin is again. Contribution margin contributes directly to your profit, meaning to cover your fixed cost also first, and in terms of break even, but contributes directly to your profit after you cover your fixed cost, after you break even. So now, how much will each unit contribute to your fixed cost? Not $8 anymore, but $6. All right, so that's $2 for each unit. Remember, you might feel, well, what is $2? Well, what about 1,000 units? That's $2,000. So that's a big difference, right? Okay, here a number of things are changing. Selling price we cut down to 9. Then we increase budget, fixed budget, advertising for 1,000. We increase sales for this. It could be also variable cost changing from $2 to $3, and then you have to make adjustments. Again, you're using always the same thing. Nothing new. Nothing new. Okay, same thing, just changes, different changes. Different changes. You have to recognize what is fixed cost. Is this fixed cost or this? Most of the time you're told, or it's very clear, right? So you don't have to be guessing. But something that is not related with the units. If the units are increasing here from 1,000 to 1,500, that doesn't mean that these $1,000 are related to that increase. It says here flat salaries, flat salaries. So that means, you cannot say, well, I included these 1,000 to variable cost. Why? This is not related to this increase of 500 here. It could have been an increase of 300. It could have been 1,300 in sales, not 1,500. It could have been any number, right? But this number is fixed. We added $1,000, that's it. Or actually, in this case, we are moving these $1,000 in this example to sales commissions, basically. Well, we're not moving these $1,000. We're just cutting them out, as you can see here, cutting out $1,000, and we will pay, instead of flat salaries, we will pay $3 in commission. So what will happen? Well, we will cut $1,000 here, but our variable cost will definitely increase, right? For how much? Well, for $3 for each unit. So that's expressed here. So now our variable costs are not 2 anymore, but are 5. 2 plus 3. Okay. So going through these examples, important. Okay, so you will look at this example, lemonade stand. Okay, so one example here. The break-even point in dollar sales for Joe company is 300,000. All right. And the company contribution margin ratio is 25%. The company desires a profit of 100,000. Sales will have to total what amount? Okay, what do you do now here? So you have this information. Sales at 300,000. So you will plug in here 300,000. The company's contribution margin ratio is 25%. Well, what does this mean? That means that contribution margin is 25% of sales. What is 25% of 300,000? It's 75,000. And if this is at break even. Well, if it's at break even, that means your net operating income is 0. Okay? So everything is here. Now, why are you doing this? You're doing this to find fixed cost. Okay? You're doing this to find fixed cost. 75,000. Why 75,000? Because only 75,000 can be here. 75 minus what is 0? Well, it's 75. 75 minus 75 is 0. So the only number here that can be is 75. Now that you know that your fixed cost is 75, you will plug it into your different scenario. If the company desires a profit of 100,000, sales would have to be what amount? Well, you know what it is at break even, and this is why you use this amount here, break even, and other information, this 25%, to find fixed cost. Now that you know fixed cost, you will plug it into here, into this scenario that you want to answer, 75. Well, what is your profit? Well, you're told you want profit to be 100, so you will plug in here 100. This number you don't know. That's a question mark, right? But you know that you have here 100. You know it because you're told. Well, if you have 100 here and you have 75 here, then what was your contribution margin? Well, it has to be 175 because that's the only number, 175 minus 75, that will give you 100. So it has to be this number, 175. Now that you know 175 as your contribution margin, well, how do you get to 700? Well, you're told that your contribution margin ratio is 25%. It's the same, nothing changed there. You don't have any other information that something changed. Price didn't change, variable cost didn't change. Of course, you have to know what contribution margin ratio means. Again, chapter 1. Contribution margin ratio is the ratio between contribution margin and revenue. And you found it here. Is 75 by doing this. Now you will just say 175 divided by 0.25 is 700, right? Why? For those of you who are not good at algebra, well, which number would give you 175 when you multiply it by 0.25? Well, 700. So you might say x times 0.25 is equal to what? 175. Well, then this will end up being x is equal to 175 divided by 0.25. Right? You can do it. So that's doing it through contribution margin format. You can do it through equations. Right? Equations here. Break even is sales 300,000 times 25%, fixed cost is 75,000. Or shortcut, same thing, 300 is equal FC. And then of course we have target profit, which we just use the same equation. So what are the target sales? That's your question mark here. Well, your target sales is your target NOI plus FC divided contribution margin. This is if you're going through, again, the shortcut, or you set up your net operating income at 100 is equal to sales minus total cost, right? And then you still manipulate it the same way as here as above, but you get to the same point. This is a perfect example, right? So it doesn't, you don't need hundreds of problems. You need to understand these few basic problems and practice them. Now, the good thing about practicing different problems from homework, exercises, lectures, and is because you just get different numbers, that's all, and different kind of views, but it's the same thing. Always same idea. Okay, contribution margin ratio is 20, companies break even point 60,000 units. selling price is $4. Same thing. I mean, same thing. If $4 is the price and 60,000 units, well, what's your revenue? 240. Your contribution margin ratio, okay, so same procedure. See, same procedure. Just different, given in a different, just different information. Erratic sales, high capacity battery laptops, the experiencing difficulty for some time. The president believed a 15,000 increase in the monthly advertising budget. What will be the effect? Okay, so this is no different than the basic example before, which we covered. So you will go through this on your own too. Okay, here the sales manager, commissions are variable cost, right? Because they're directly related to the volume, to the activity, number of units. This chapter is important in a sense that not because we will use a lot of contribution margin, yes, break even or margin of safety or in the future, but it's important in a sense that we will use this contribution margin format for all chapters, or I should say variable fixed cost format, much more than the traditional format. But we will continue using cost of goods sold, gross margin, sales and admin, traditional format in the chapters after the midterm. But we will work a lot with contribution margin format, meaning breaking things into variable and fixed. So it's very important that you get comfortable with how costs behave, right? And it's fairly simple and straightforward. You're just looking at what is changing. If the thing is changing with activity, that's a variable cost. It's not changing with activity, that's not a variable cost. It doesn't matter, even if it changes. Like as we can see in these examples, advertising changed or some other fixed cost changed. It's changed, that's fine, even though it's called fixed. It changed, but it changed just in total, but not because of activity, right? That's the main point. Okay, any questions before we jump to maybe a couple exercises and any questions? 6A. Everybody good?
Can you go back to the why did you get a fixed cost?
I'm sorry?
Can you go back to the slide, like the fixed cost, like I see different number in fixed cost, and I want to understand why.
Go over that. Go over the narrated lecture, so you will know why. I said fixed cost can change. We are just given instructions. We just told advertising increased, or we hired another person. It's a fixed cost, right? So go to the narrated lectures. Okay, this is a high-low method, which you need to know. And this was an example from chapter 1, again, mixed cost, very straightforward, except that this is the same thing that we covered in chapter 1. You don't need to know this cartograph plot or regression method, but you need to know high-low method. High-low method. So with high-low method, it's fairly straightforward. You find 2 points. That's what this is here. Slope of the line, right? Rise over run. So you find you don't need to memorize rise over run. You will memorize it by changes in costs divided by changes in activity to find variable cost per unit. But the bottom line, you will find it by looking at how the activity changes in relation to cost, right? And you will always start with activity first when you're looking for those 2 points 2 points, high point and low point. So we have a set of data here. We have hours and we have costs that correspond to those hours. This is a mixed cost, this maintenance cost. We don't know how much of it is variable and how much is fixed. It's total cost, right? So a portion of it is variable, a portion of it is fixed. We don't know how much until we do analysis. We cannot guess. And if you look at this, well, you can try to see if this is variable cost straightforward. How? Well, you would just divide this 7,950 into 625. So what would that be? Let's say that's 7,000 divided by, let's say it's more than $10 clearly. Let's say it's $12. Okay, let's say it's $12 per hour. Well, is this also $12 per hour? Well, you can see without a calculator, it's not. Is this $12 per hour? Well, you can see it's not. So you get the idea right away that this is not purely variable cost, right? So it's a mixed cost, clearly. Well, if the question is high-low method, then you should assume likely not every piece of the question is maybe mixed, but you should assume that you're dealing with a mixed cost. So how much of this is variable, how much of this is fixed? That's our goal here, to figure out how much is variable, how much is fixed. And how we do this, we start with activity first. We find 2 points, the lowest one and the highest one. So those are the 2 points, 450 and 850 in this set. And what costs correspond to this? Well, these costs correspond to this, 7,400 and 9,800. And these will be our points. This will be our rise over run. But because we are looking at for cost, dollar cost per something, then of course we will put dollars on top and activity on the bottom. So we will say the difference, that's the slope. The difference between these 2 points, 9,800 and 7,400, is $2,400. And the difference between these 2 points is 400 hours. So that will give us $6 per hour. Okay. Is this the answer now? Well, that's the answer just for the variable portion, right? And we said that this is not purely variable cost. So clearly this is not just $6 is the answer. Clearly we said here this would probably be closer to 12 if it's just, this is just on top of my head, if it's purely variable, but it's not. So this 6 is not our final answer, right? This is just our variable portion. This is our variable portion. But now that we have variable portion, $6, we will go to the next step and we will plug in this variable portion into our basic equation. Total cost is total fixed, total variable, right? So what is our variable? Well, it's 6, and we can pick either one of these 2 activities. It doesn't matter which one, 850 or 450. It doesn't matter. We will get the same result. $6 times 850, we pick higher one, 6 times 850. And what's the total cost in case of 850? Well, it's 9,800, right? We're told here. So the difference will be 4,700. So that will be a total fixed cost. And this total fixed cost will be the difference then for, not the difference, but total fixed cost will be for all activities fixed cost, 4,700, because that was our point. Now we found what fixed cost is. This is approximation, right? Regression analysis, of course, will be much more precise. But using high-low method very quickly, we can find what the fixed cost is. And now we know how much of our costs here in this set, how our costs kind of behave. We know that 4,700 is in each one of these. The same. 4,700 here, 4,700 second one, third one, fourth one. Everywhere 4,700. Again, regression analysis would give us a little bit more precise result. But what we care about here is kind of a good estimation. So 4,700. So now we know 4,700, and this is our equation. 4,700 plus 6 times x. X is machine hours. So now you can plug in any number. Any number. I'll get to you, Mike. You can plug in any number here, and you will get the good estimate of cost. Now, if you try to go back and plug in this equation into one of these numbers, you will not get the exact same. If you try to plug in that equation of 4,700 fixed plus $6 time machine hours, if you try to plug it into 550, you will not get 7,625. Why? Because high-low method is not precise enough, but you will get in a ballpark, in a range, in a kind of good range, and that's good enough for us, right? Of course, on the exam, you will get the number, and that will be the answer, right? But I'm saying here in this set, because on the exam or in a homework, the question will not be one of these numbers here. It will be something that is not there, right? But you can try, right? You can try and plug in this equation, 4,700 in fixed plus $6 times, and try these 550. And you will not get 7625, but you will get somewhere in the ballpark, right? It will definitely be closer to 7625 than to 90-100 or to 80-75, right? Because these $6 will be related to these 550, because 4,700 in fixed cost are the same in all of these. Okay, yeah, a couple of people are raised their hand. Go ahead, Mai and somebody else. Yes, go ahead. You can ask questions.
I have a question, Professor, regarding the x-axis and y-axis. We must always put the price on y-axis and the other variable on the x-axis.
You don't really care about axis. You don't really care about axis. Again, nobody will ask you for this scatter graph plot or regression method. Now, in the homework, maybe, but in the exam, you will not have to deal with, so you don't need to worry. But yeah, I mean, because.
But it affects our calculation if we do the vice versa, yes?
Well, if you're using this definition here, slope of the line, right? But this is why I explained it in a kind of a more common sense way. You're thinking, you're looking for 2 points that are high and low, right?
Yes.
And then, of course, you're looking for dollar amounts per unit. Well, so then the dollars have to be on top, right? Here, what is explaining is mathematical terms, slope of the line, rise over run, rise over run. So rise is the y-axis and run is the x-axis, which is exactly changing costs divided by changing activity. Now, if you say you reverse this, and if you make a mistake, and you, first of all, again, you don't need a plot. You don't need to plot it on x or y axis at all. But if you reverse this, and then you say, I will put units on the y-axis. I mean, what will you get? If you try to divide units by dollars, what will be your answer? It doesn't make sense, right? Because what you're looking for how much does it cost you each unit of something? So you need to have dollars over units.
Thank you.
Does this answer your question?
Yes, Professor. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So don't worry about the plot, or even don't worry about, again, necessarily memorizing this rise over run. Remember that whatever works for you, if you like it, go ahead. Remember that you have to find how much something costs you. So the dollars have to be on top, of course. How much do you pay for a t-shirt when you go to, well, I pay $5 per t-shirt. So the dollars have to be on top, $5 per t-shirt, not dollar not t-shirts per dollar, right? Okay, somebody else raised their hand too. Mai or somebody else, who else raised their hand? A couple of people.
Oh, Professor, I raised my hand, I know, like a long time ago, so.
So go ahead.
Oh, no, you already answered me. Thank you.
Okay. So this would be the equation, right? This is the equation that you're looking for. So again, you're plugging in this in, and you can try at a lower level of activity. So play with this and see that you will get the same. You will get the same same solution. Okay. Any questions about high-low? I think we're doing well here. Everybody good? Let me see if we have maybe exercises. One of the company price small caps, those $50 per, okay. So when you're working on problems, especially on the exam, for example, you always start with the question, right? I mean, you kind of scan the question quickly and you say what type of a question this, you go to the question first because it will give you an idea what you're looking for. Because if you start from, you know, first sentence or stuff, sometimes there's information that is irrelevant. Of course, if you know what's going on. If you don't know what's going on, then everything is irrelevant because you're just guessing. But if you know what's going on, if you know your stuff, then you notice later, wow, you know, a lot of this information is kind of irrelevant. I wasted a lot of time trying to memorize this, put it down, or whatever. I mean, you shouldn't also be make kind of shortcuts too much, because then you might miss something. But the bottom line, you start with the question and you say, so you know what you're looking for. So for example, there's a lot of information here, but then it depends what the question is. So I guess there are a couple of questions here. So one of the products sells for $50 per unit, variable expense at $30 per store. So you know right away, you see $50 you're selling it for, $30 cost you. So you know right away that your contribution margin is $18 per unit. Immediately, so you put this down right away. Of course, and you read the question again, and so you kind of have an idea what I'm looking for. But it doesn't hurt you ever to right away say, what's my contribution margin? 18 bucks. Fixed expenses are 108 per month. Okay, let's put it down right away here. Now it depends what you need. You know, do you need this ratio? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you're just looking for how many units you need or something. So you don't necessarily need a ratio, but maybe you want a ratio. If you're you know, the question is, what are your break-even sales in dollars? But you can get it also through units, find units, and then you multiply by price. That's it. Okay, what's the break-even point in unit sales and in dollar sales? Well, in dollar sales, you see, you already have here, you figured out your contribution margin ratio quickly, 36%. So it's very quick. You just say, well, 108 divided by 0.36. Remember, when you're working in percentages, you need to convert them into decimals, right? So you cannot say divided by 36. That's 36. Divided by 0.36, that's the percentage of 36%. So you just divide it here, 108, 36, so it gives you 300,000, boom. Or if you're looking in units, well, you say 108 divided by $18 contribution margin. So that's 6,000 units. Or 6,000 times $50 per unit, 300 sales. So same solution here. If the variable expense per store increase as a percentage of the selling price, will it result in higher or lower? Well, we said it earlier. If think about it, this is your selling price now, 50. your variable cost is 32. So your contribution margin is 18. Now, if your price is staying 50, if your variable cost increase to 40, which means increase in percentage of the selling price, well, how much is your contribution margin? It's 10. Do you need to sell more or units or less units? Well, of course, you need to sell many more units to break even, or for anything, many more units. You can see different ways here that I work with this problem. So shortcuts or full equation, which brings you the shortcuts, same answers always. Yeah. Now, I didn't do contribution margin for question 1, but I do it for question 3, for example. At present, the company is selling 8,000 stoves per month. 8,000 stoves per month. Sales manager convinced that 10% reduction in selling price. Well, in that case, if the question is, what would be the difference between these two? You have to do both, right, next to each other. So you do it, current scenario is what? Well, 8,000 times 50 is 400K, and then times 32 here is 256K, or you can go straight to contribution margin. You say 18 times 8,000. So see, if you're comfortable, if you know, you skip these two pieces already, because you just know, well, you go straight to contribution margin because you know it's 18. So fixed cost 108. So currently you're making $36,000 in profit. Now, if you do this, then what would happen? Well, if you do this, it says that 25% increase in units sales. So you would sell 10,000 units because 25% of 8,000 is 2,000. So your new sales will be 450. But remember, the common mistake the students make is they just copy this number here, 256 then, but as variable costs, because it doesn't say anything about change in variable costs. But units changed. Units changed. It doesn't matter that $32 per unit is the same. Yes, it's the same, but the number of units is not 8,000, it's 10,000. So variable cost total will change too, to 320. So now you have contribution margin actually 130, lower than before, because despite your units increasing much higher, 25%, your number of units, but your what happened here? Contribution margin is much lower because you decreased your price for 10%. And 10% of 50 is 5. So now your new price is 45. So now your contribution margin per unit is not 18 anymore, but 13. So 13 times 10,000 is 130,000. Your fixed cost stayed the same. So now your profit is 22,000, which is a difference of $14,000 negative. You lost $14,000. Well, you didn't lose money. You made money, 22,000, but you lost negative, right? You have negative 14,000. You lost $14,000 compared to the previous scenario. So you have to be able to do this. This is kind of straightforward. It looks like a lot, but you're just doing the same thing next to each other. Again, these are the things that people miss often. But when you understand that these three things change together, always with activity, same units, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. Fixed cost is separate, it's fixed, unrelated units. Then that's not a problem. What's the question for? How many stores will have to be sold at a new selling price to attain target? Well, you can plug in here 35. You can use the same format and plug in here 35,000 and say my fixed cost is 108. So that would be, you need contribution margin of what, 140, 3. Well, 143, if your contribution margin is 13, then how many units you need to sell? 11,000 units. Right? Questions? Questions? Everybody good? Huh? Yes?
Yes, this was a great review.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. I appreciate it. Excellent. Okay, it's already 2 o'clock. We don't need to do, you can do the other 2 online. So you have them in narrated versions. So I think this was good. So as I suggested, go ahead right away. Jump into this chapter right away. Don't wait until last second, because everything looks easy, and it is easy. Everything looks easy, and then you can do it here and there. Blah. Oh, I get it. But then under pressure, the problem looks a little bit different. Again, it's the same thing. It just looks a little bit different. Then suddenly you're kind of stuck, right? So, so it's a good idea that you go straight to this chapter now before. Well before, let's say, over the weekend, and then you have enough time to review things next week after we do the review on Sunday. Mansoureh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Professor. I have a request. I don't know if it is possible or impossible. But when you got in-person test, everything is in front of you. You don't need to write it down. But in online test and calculation, you need to write everything down first in front of you, then start calculation, and it takes a long time. Especially for me, that I'm not that much young. I just the way I studied, I highlight, I make note, I make everything. So it for me, I can't move very fast. I think maybe other person have this problem. Would you please consider